Because he didn't. It's really simple. He didn't pass a budget. He didn't even meet his most basic constitutional mandate as governor of introducing a balanced budget. And I'll remind you that that's what Section 2A of the Constitution says there, right? It's not like B, C, or D. It's A says that the Constitution starts with the governor, or the budget starts with the governor introducing a balanced budget proposal. He didn't do that a single time. Not 1 year, not 2, not 3, not even in the 4th. A budget proposal that was balanced. Number 2, then after he's supposed to do that, that's when the legislature is supposed to get to work. Now, these guys had to go around the governor. And you heard him speak, and I know you did because I did many times, talk about the Senate grand bargain, which right when they were on the eve of passing a Senate grand bargain, he's the one who tanked it, right? So, again, the beauty about my job is that I get to tell the story of the governor's failure based on the truth, based on the numbers that don't lie. And the reality of it is that we have $1 billion worth of interest penalty payments that were racked up in just 2.5 years under Governor Rauner, when it took us more than 18 years to get to that $1 billion mark with 4 different governors of 2 different parties. So, you know, I know the mayor, you asked about his speech and how is it any different. I don't think he's ever had to give a speech in front of a crowd where he is talking about the worst governor in America, and that is something that's unique to Illinois today. Again, it's the legislature's job to pass a budget with the governor, right? But the governor vetoed the budget that that was sent to him, and the governor has been an absolute obstacle. You've never had a governor in the history of this state who has been such an antagonist to the budget process, being so disrespectful to not even try to introduce a balanced budget proposal that is really his one most important constitutional duty. So, you know, Rauner is a massive, colossal failure. The numbers tell the story. I get to now shine a light on those numbers in a way that no controller has ever been able to do before, or no one has taken on. The transparency initiatives that he himself vetoed, like the Debt Transparency Act, that requires monthly reporting now, that you folks as members of the media can sink your teeth in and talk about what the actual most up-to-date financials are for the state. It may seem like you guys are used to it now, but we've only had this information available for, what, 8 months now, 7 months? Like, that's crazy in the history of the state of Illinois that we were working off of financial numbers from almost a year before. So Governor Rauner could have embraced those. I mean, the fact that he would even say with a straight face that transparency is a hallmark of his administration, I mean, again, that only makes sense on opposite day. He has taken every action to prove the opposite of that, and it's been my job as controller to shine a light on that, to speak truth to the numbers, which are not political, they're just factual.
How is our cash flow? Do you see, we've had an uptick in the national economy.
Yep.
The tax increase. Are we improving our cash flows for the revenue?
So remember that the increase in revenue that passed in the budget did nothing to help me pay down the bill backlog. So yes, certainly it helps that we have a budget. So let's talk about cash flow gets better when we actually have a budget that allows me to legally pay the bills and to manage through that debt. But the tax increase only went as far as filling the hole that had been blown into the budget when the original tax that had been in place expired once Governor Rauner took office. So, we wouldn't have been through this fiscal disaster if the governor, as he promised, was going to balance the budget with a tax decrease. He said, I can do it with a tax decrease. The $5 billion hole got blown into our budget, and the governor continued to spend as if that $5 billion was coming in, and even spent $2.5 billion more than the legislature had even ever authorized. So this is, in fact, the largest, Bruce Rauner is, in fact, the largest deficit spender in the history of any governor in the state of Illinois, and the numbers speak to that. So we had a lot of work ahead of us. Cash flow is king. But right now, it's more like in the pond stage. It's not. We're not there yet. We are. I mean, our office is still continuing to triage. I'm still a little bit like Jimmy Stewart and It's a Wonderful Life, right? How much can you get by on? I can't give you everything I owe you, but how much can you get by on? And this is how we continue to treat the folks, because at the end of the day, I still have anywhere between a $6 billion to $8 billion bill backlog. You might remember that the legislature appropriated additional supplemental funds for, or supplemental appropriations for things like Department of Corrections that had deficits spent almost $500 million. But at the end of the day, just because they appropriate it doesn't mean that the money is there to follow those supplemental appropriations. So my job in actuality gets a little bit tougher. I still have a tough road to hoe with almost $8 billion on any given day of a bill backlog, but we will get there. I mean, we're not out of the woods yet, but I can at least see some light between the trees.
You mentioned your Republican opponent, Darlene Sanger, today in your speech. Yesterday, she referenced you as well. I think she called you Lady Madigan with her mouth. Kind of what is your response to her, again, attaching you to Speaker Madigan? And are you taking her as a legitimate or threatening opponent?
Well, regarding those comments, I would just say that, alliteration is nice, but a little consideration for those dead veterans in Quincy, their families, and the remaining veterans would have been nicer. I have yet to hear her apologize yet for trying to claim Tammy Duckworth, a decorated war hero who left almost half her body on the battlefield fighting for our country, for trying to pin the blame of these deaths on her when it was in fact her boss. You recall that she sent an email suggesting that they should blame this on, maybe we can pin this on Duckworth. That is just so unacceptable, so lack of character, and this is the woman who Governor Rauner chose to run against me. Also, most importantly, I would say, beyond that just morally corrupt stuff, the fact that she herself is running for the position of controller at the same time that she was working against the greatest transparency reform in the history of the controller's office, the Debt Transparency Act. I mean, honest to God, does that make any sense? Again, no, just on opposite day, right? So this is just par for the course for the Rauner administration, of which she was still a part of, when she was working against the very legislation that would shine a light that's in a critical light for the controller's office to have. The person running for that job believes in less transparency. That just doesn't make any sense, and I think that voters can see very clearly through that. Okay, I am going to answer that. I know they want me to walk away, but I think checks and balances are much more important than phony made-up numbers that they can't show their math on. And let me just remind everybody who thinks, I know that consolidation sounds good. I've supported consolidations on the local level. We have so many units of municipal government, and we should be looking at that. But having said that, you may not know, and if you don't, I'll just remind you that the two largest government embezzlement schemes in the history of the United States of America happened in the state of Illinois, in the two offices where both the treasurer and the controller were the same person. Orville Hodge, back in 1956, not sometime in the 1950s. It wasn't just some little bit of money like my challenger would like. She doesn't even know the history of the office that she's running for. In 1956, Mr. Hodge went to jail for embezzling $6 million, which today would be worth about $57 million. So it's not a little bit of money. Rita Crundwell, more recently, in 2012, was actually the largest embezzlement in the history of the country. And she was close to Mr. Hodge. Her embezzlement today would be worth about $60 million. So Illinois has tried this. We haven't done a pretty good job of this at all. And I truly believe that there's a great deal of value to be had for taxpayers to ensure that there is a check and balance, that the person responsible for managing the state's funds here in Illinois is not the same person that has access to that checkbook. It's just common sense. Thank you.